So the first question to address, could the rise of early Christian belief arise by itself? Firstly, let's ask ourselves, did Christian belief have to arise early, or could it have been a late development? Which means to say maybe Jesus roamed the earth for 30 odd years. Christianity did not happen until a few hundred years later, or sometimes maybe even thousands of years later. Now, who do we know are the first Christians? That's quite a well-known fact. The first disciples, Peter, John, Matthew, Paul, James, these are all first century Christians, right? So from there, it's already pretty obvious that Christian belief arose early. We also have writings from the early Christian fathers, early church fathers, that suggest that it's early. Now, I'm going to go in a little bit into the mindset of a first century Jew just in a little bit. And once we understand that, I think it becomes even clearer and stronger that Christian belief had to arise early. It could not have been a late development. Okay, so just hold on to that thought. If Christian belief arose early, we have two options. Could it have been a natural man-made development? Could it have just happened by itself with some natural explanations? Or did something significant really happen for this to even be possible? And for us to investigate these two, let's again put on the lens of a first century Jew. Now, why do I keep repeating this? Because as modern 21st century thinkers, we like to apply our own perspectives to investigate whether the resurrection happened, right? So we might say, well, the resurrection could just be a vision. I could say the resurrection is just saying that Jesus is now spiritually alive somewhere. It's not verifiable. So that's very well how Christianity would have started, right? That's putting our modern lens onto a historical case. But if you want to investigate the case properly, N.T. Wright says that you have to put on the lens of the people and the witnesses back then who were first century Jews. They were the one that became Christians. So we have to understand how they think and what would have caused them to become a Christian, right? So let's try to understand what the first century Jews thought of the resurrection. And over here, I'm going to appeal to the Old Testament. Firstly, I'll look at Daniel chapter 12. If you look at verses 2 to 3, it says, many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake. Okay, I'm not going through the rest of the verses. But what this suggests is that those who sleep are people who have died, dead bodies, and these dead bodies in the dust of the earth, because they were buried, shall awake. Now, Daniel is actually a reference to Isaiah chapter 26. And if you look at verse 19, it says, your dead shall live, their corpses shall rise, right? Now we're talking about corpses, we are talking about physical bodies. What does this tell us about a first century Jew's understanding of resurrection? Number one, they believe that the resurrection happens. Number two, they believe that the resurrection is always a bodily resurrection. They are not thinking spiritual. If you read the Old Testament, all references to resurrection is always physical. Okay, so they believe in the resurrection. Their understanding of the resurrection is always physical. Now, if you understand the context of Daniel in this passage, it's actually a prophetic passage. It talks about end times, right? So what the Jews believe about the resurrection is that there will be a general resurrection at the end times where all believers would be resurrected bodily, okay? To make this even clearer, if you refer to Isaiah, verse 19 here in chapter 26, actually just a couple of verses earlier, if you refer to verse 14, it says the dead do not live. If you are dead, you are dead, okay? Those who are dead, stay dead. shades do not rise because you have punished and destroyed them, blah, blah, blah. So after you die, you do not come back alive. That's the general circumstance. But in verse 19, it says your dead shall live, because Isaiah was contrasting between normal times and end times, right? So it's the end times where the resurrection happens. So what do we get from this? The meaning of resurrection. Now, I didn't talk about the pagan understanding, but if you're interested, I can dwell more into that. Feel free to type it in Slido. But the meaning of resurrection, both in Jewish and non-Jewish world of late antiquity, it never meant that person had simply gone to heaven or had been exalted in some way, which was not bodily. Okay? There are other words, various rich variety of terminology that can describe other these embodied post-mortem states. Resurrection always meant embodiment. It was a physical resurrection. It was the same for the pagans who, of course, thought it was impossible, as it was for the Jews.